So the first COVID-19 vaccines in the UK were given out yesterday, and some people seem to be having some kind of allergic reaction to it. Is that something people should be concerned about as we wait for it to be approved here in the US?
Yeah, I think that's probably got more attention than it may have actually needed, to be honest. We'll certainly keep an eye out for those, but it was 2 individuals out of the thousands of people for whom they gave that vaccine. And I think what was the most reassuring to me was that both of those individuals knew they had significant allergic reactions to other things in the past, so much so that they carried their own EpiPen with them. So this is not something that we saw in the general public in folk who took the vaccine in the now more than 45,000 people who've taken that vaccine in different trials. So the other thing that people should remember is that as part of the rollout for this, here in the United States, we've factored in a waiting time after you get vaccinated. We're probably very used to getting the flu shot and sitting around for 20 seconds and then being told, right, you're off you go. Whereas here, actually, we've intentionally factored in just an observation period afterwards to make sure there's no issues. But again, in those phase 3 trials here, where more than 45,000 people, that was not seen to be a significant event. I think if you knew you had an allergy, if you're someone sitting at home right now who knows that they have a significant allergy, take an EpiPen, have had an anaphylactic event before, then I think I would simply discuss that with your clinician and say, look, what does this mean for me? Because generally speaking, for people who get other allergies, this is not going to be a problem at all.
So this isn't likely to slow down the approval for this vaccine at all, is what it sounds like.
No, I mean, I think the data that's now in the public that the FDA released to us all yesterday was very reassuring. I mean, the safety data that came with it was very robust, and I can't imagine this will pose them concern. I mean, they will certainly look at it. In some instances, we sort of have the advantage of having watched the UK walk through that process of rolling out their vaccine this week. But to date, I haven't seen anything that would make me dissuaded.
And then as far as reactions, I mean, that's pretty typical for any vaccine, right? Some people react to things a little bit differently. So it's not like this is something that has never been seen before.
No, and I think people need to recognize that this is typical to many other vaccines, as you say, that it would be not uncommon for folks to come out having experienced in the next 12 to 24 hours after a dose to feel some fatigue. Some people get some headaches, a few people get some fevers and chills. It's a stimulatory vaccine. It's very protective. So your immune system will recognize that you've had a vaccine. And that's actually a protective effect. People shouldn't be surprised if they get some symptoms in the day afterwards. It wasn't uncommon in the trials. But I think to say that it equally wasn't any different than some of the other vaccines that we see that are pretty good vaccines like shingles or some of the tetanus vaccines that we have. Most people had no reactions to this vaccine at all. That's the most reassuring part.
And so for people who maybe are more prone to allergies or allergic reactions, they should be talking to their doctors when this is going to be a while until it gets to the general public, but start to have those conversations with their doctors maybe around now, right?
Yeah, I think again, I'd reiterate that those 2 allergic reactions that happened in the UK were for people who had high-grade severe allergic responses. They carried an EpiPen. So this would not pose me any concern if you get if you get mild food allergies or other intolerances to medicines. This is not going to be an issue for you at all. I think if you do have someone who has severe allergy, who's anaphylaxed in the past, that's the kind of thing where I think a careful conversation with your physician is going to be valuable. We still have to remember that we are doing this in the middle of a pandemic, and we need people to be prepared to say, hey, look, I'm okay getting a vaccine now because I want to break the back of what has been a horrible year for us with COVID. And people shouldn't be afraid of these 2 reports from the UK. It's 2 out of thousands, and here in the United States, 43,000 people whose data is presented to us now. It's all very reassuring.
Yeah, and what I've heard from some people is that they're worried about the long-term potential side effects. People who feel like we have not studied these vaccines enough, or are scared that maybe, a year or a couple months from now, they might develop some kind of weird ailment or something that they didn't have before. what do you say to those folks, or kind of how do we respond to those people who are worried about the longer term effects?
Yeah, well, I want to separate out long-term effectiveness. How long does the protection last from long-term side effects? Because they're two different questions. And so let's walk through them. When we talk about vaccine side effects, the overwhelming majority of those all occur within 24 to at most sort of 72 hours. The vaccine that's in front of the FDA now was requested to follow people for 2 months, well beyond the time when we get late reactions to vaccines. I don't know of any vaccine issues, frankly, that occur beyond that time point. In fact, when they've been looked at before, they've not been found. So I don't have a single theoretical reason to think that this will cause late problems. It's just not built that way. Now, that said, that is separate from me understanding what it means in terms of how long it can protect me. What we know so far is this is a 95% protective vaccine. That's incredibly effective, but that was early on. I don't know if this lasts for 6 months or 6 years. We haven't been tracking it long enough. In fact, people who are in those early phase trials are still inputting their data to help us continue to learn. But again, I'd come back to the fact that we're in a pandemic where at the moment we've got 2,500 people dying of this every day. It matters less to me how long it lasts for, that I get people protection that they need right now. So I understand people's concern about long-term safety issues, but I think there's not really any, sort of vaccinology reason why those fears should be there. It's actually pretty reassuring to me that we've studied it in so many people and been able to get that data so quickly.
And with this vaccine, these vaccine developers are going to continue to follow these people, right? Like, just because the vaccine comes out next week or something doesn't mean that that's when the scientists stop looking at the patients.
No, not at all. I mean, I keep getting my weekly updates when I input my data, having received it during the trial. So they will continue to follow all of us who've been a part of that trial all the way along, because we need to understand how long it lasts. We may find that vaccines tend to wane with time. They do for every other vaccine. So people shouldn't think that just because it's released under an emergency authorization means that the data collection stops. Quite the opposite. In fact, it'll be interesting for us to see as the FDA release their information how much they in fact require companies to continue inputting data sort of over the longer term. My expectation is that they'll continue to collect it just as much as they are at the moment. So that'll be part of the EUA process here for sure.
And I didn't realize you were part of this vaccine trial. So what has that experience been like for you? And can you tell people a little bit about what that process is like, and from a firsthand experience?
Yeah, so the phase 3 trials were placebo-controlled trials. So I don't to this day know if I had the placebo or the real vaccine. But I think I probably speak for many of us who participated when I say that, we've all seen impacts of COVID occur across the country. And if this was the way that we could help, get us to a solution, then it seemed like the right thing to do. And frankly, as someone who tries to, explain to people the benefits of vaccination and what they should be concerned about or pleased about, I didn't think I could have that conversation with any sort of oomph if I hadn't gone through it myself and walked that road. And so, it's perhaps given me a really good insight as to the level of care taken in gathering the kind of data that ultimately gives me a lot of reassurance that it's safe and pretty effective. 95% effective is way more than what I could have asked for. Like, this is a real light at the end of the tunnel, and people should recognize it as such. It has been profoundly effective. And so, this seemed like a no-brainer for me to want to participate in that.
And were you, just out of curiosity, are you part of the trial because you at one point contracted COVID-19, or is this just voluntary?
No, I mean, we've been running a number of COVID trials here, so this was I know I go into the rooms of lots of people with COVID every day, so it sort of made sense that I would want to participate. I haven't had COVID that I know of, let's put it that way.
Yeah. All right, great. Anything else you want to add that I didn't ask, but you think is important to say?
No, I mean, I would reiterate that this is a light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, it has to be viewed in that light. 95% effectiveness is an incredibly effective vaccine, and to think that we have been able to come up with, you know, a year ago, not even knowing what this virus was, sequencing it in a month, having a vaccine ready to start trials in March, and here we are, ready for next week to start rolling out some vaccine, sort of into the general community, is a profound effort by so many people involved. And will this turn a pandemic off tomorrow? It won't. Will the rest of December and into January still be pretty torrid? It's going to be. Um, but this is our way out of this quagmire, and we have to recognize it as such. It's going to break the back of this pandemic if we do it right.
Yeah, no, it is crazy to think that. I think we just had the 1 year anniversary of when this was first detected in Wuhan, and now here we are at a vaccine. So there's still diseases out there and illnesses that we still haven't figured out. So to, have all hands on deck across the globe for this is kind of cool.
Yeah, and I think that's probably what's happened. Like, people often worry that this has been developed so quickly, and how could we possibly be sure of the safety of it? But I think people need to recognize that companies haven't been doing anything else except COVID all year. Patients haven't been thinking about anything else except COVID. So we've been able to enroll tens of thousands more volunteers in these trials than we would normally do. There are more people studied with this vaccine than many other vaccines that come to market. And so it's been such a singular focus by not just the US, but all of the countries involved in vaccine development, that's pretty inspiring. Like, that is a really humbling thing to think about, that we can do this within a year. That's impressive.